welcome to Malaysia, welcome to live coverage. The build-up starts to round 20 in the 2025 MotoGP World Championship. It's always fantastic to be back in this part of the world, of course, a part of the world which is very familiar to MotoGP. Not only has it been the host venue of the Malaysian Grand Prix since 1999, give or take a couple of years during the COVID pandemic, but of course this has been a serial testing venue for the riders and teams for so many years. The 2025 MotoGP World Championship campaign, well, it kicked off right here in Sepang back in February. We already know who our MotoGP World Champion is in 2025, and 10 years after that race in 2015, sadly, this race will not feature the new world champion, Marc Marquez. More on some sad news regarding the factory Ducati star coming up shortly as we move into this opening 45-minute FP1 session, where we are celebrating yet another first-time winner in what is turning out to be a rather unpredictable finish to this year's World Championship campaign, as Trackhouse MotoGP team's Raul Fernandez prevailed last weekend down under in Phillip Island. Back-to-back first-time MotoGP winners since Miguel Oliveira and Frankie Morbidelli all the way back at the Styrian and San Marino rounds 5 years ago in 2020. That's the honour, of course, for Fermin Aldeguer, the victor in Mandalika a few weeks ago, and Raul Fernandez. There's not been three first-time MotoGP winners in three different Grand Prix in 9 long years since 2016. We're looking at you, Pedro Acosta. We're looking at you, Luca Marini, as maybe top candidates to continue this great run of results going. Let us sort of be in the commentary box as always with you, with Jack Appleyard down in what is, thankfully for Jack's sake, a relatively cool pit lane at the moment. As you'll see, there's rather heavy cloud cover circulating above this Sepang International Circuit. Well, this was the news that Ducati feared, which Marc Marquez feared, MotoGP fans all around the world feared. That first lap collision with Marco Bezzecchi over in that Grand Prix of Indonesia. We knew for certain had ruled Marc out of Australia and Sepang. Hopefully he might be able to return for one of at least 2 of our European rounds remaining in Portimao and Valencia. Sadly, that is not the case. The recovering right shoulder, and we'll see Marc Marquez. His 2025 season is over. We will not see Marc back on a factory Ducati until February the 3rd, 2026, right here back at the Sepang International Circuit, when winter testing resumes here in a few months' time. Really sad news, Lewis.
Really sad news for him and for us, of course, who really wanted to see the world champion on track before the end of the season. Fans of Marc Marquez shouldn't get too concerned. It's not a major setback that Marc Marquez has suffered from in his recovery. It's just simply the way it's progressing. He still has to have his arm and shoulder immobilized for another couple of weeks or so, and ultimately that's going to just leave him with no time to get himself ready and prepared to return in Portimao or Valencia. And perhaps the biggest one for Marc Marquez is that he's going to miss the test that follows that Valencia Grand Prix. So as you say, he won't ride a bike again until right here in testing in February.
Who would have thought, coming up to our flyweight tour, that we'd be leaving it with Fermin Aldeguer and now Raul Fernandez as first-time MotoGP winners. This was just, 5 days ago at Phillip Island, the wonderful Australian Grand Prix venue. Marco Bezzecchi bolting at the front, of course, where he had to serve the 2 long-lap penalty for his collision with Marc in that Indonesian Grand Prix. An early battle with fellow Spaniard Pedro Acosta. I saw Raul Fernandez get up into 2nd place, and once Bezzecchi had served his 2 long laps, which cost him over 4 seconds and dropped the Italian back to 6th place, well, it left Raul Fernandez at the front of the Australian Grand Prix with a lead that, to be frank, he never looked like relinquishing. His first Premier Class success, first, of course, for the American-based Trackhouse MotoGP team, which now means all 11 of our Grand Prix teams in MotoGP have won now a Grand Prix. 76 Grand Prix it took the 25-year-old Spaniard to win his first Grand Prix, and now a new record. 18 riders in our full-time MotoGP grid have won at least one Premier Class race, an all-time lap record. We've told you throughout this season that we have a very deep talent pool in the MotoGP World Championship. Talent pool, which sadly right now is missing arguably its most talented. No Marc Marquez until 2026. Let's get the thoughts on that news from Ducati boss Davide Tardozzi, who joins Jack.
Yeah, great of Davide to join me. Good morning to everybody, first of all, here from Malaysia. Davide, sad news for everyone in the paddock, everyone watching at home. We won't be seeing Mark up until next year in February. Quite remarkably, just firstly, your reaction to the fact that we won't see Mark for the remainder of this year and how impactful that's going to be on preparing that 2026 machine.
We are looking to the future with Michele, but in the end we are here trying hardly to bring back Pecco on the position he deserves. So we'll see this morning what it will be since the first run. We are really confident because this is the race track that will suit his riding style. He's been always fast here, so we are confident. We are positive.
And on Mark, not being here for the remainder of the season, and in particular, that Valencia test, we know that Valencia test is so crucial to give the feedback the guys to then go into the winter break to develop the bike ahead of it coming back out here in Sepang. So how much of an impact can he now have on what that 2026 machine will look like?
Sorry, it's a shame that we can't have Mark there, but it's more important that he recover his injury 100%. So we know very well Mark, we miss something having not him there, but we are sure that he will recover everything from the first race of from the first test of 2026 here in Malaysia. So having Mark, you have always plus.
Absolutely. With regards to his replacement, we spoke to Mauro in Phillip Island and he said that Nicolo Buliga, who of course just finished second in the World Superbike Championship, is a real contender to step in. He mentioned a test being organised. Have you managed to organise that test for Nicolo?
Yeah, it's something that we do because we want him to be confident with the bike because of his job of 2026 where he will help us to develop the new bike. So having know-how about the 1000 bike is something that can help him in the future. And then after the test we will decide what to do for the next race.
So that test has been organised, you're saying. When is it and where is it?
You mean?
Yes.
Gareth, but yeah, it's something that we would like to do it. We are still discussing with him, but it's something that we think it could be better, but everything will be decided after this race.
Just finally, I'm looking at Pecco's bikes and they both look pretty different. Am I right in thinking one's a 24 spec, one's a 25 spec? You're going to be using this morning as a bit of a test session to compare data from February?
As we always said, being a factory rider means that you can have different possibilities on the bike, so you have put in one bike and in the other.
Thanks, Davide.
Thanks very much, Jack. As always, a very enlightening interview down there with the Ducati boss, Davide Tardox. Michele Pirro, the Ducati test rider, is once again standing in for Marc Marquez this weekend here in Malaysia. But as you heard there, it looks like new World Superbike Championship runner-up Nicolo Buliga is certainly being lined up for replacement rides in our final two Grand Prix in Portimao in Valencia, an upcoming test on the Desmos Adichie Ducati MotoGP machine at Perez. Sounds like that one's not penciled in. Doesn't sound like it's already pending. Buliga looks like he'll be on a GP bike, a MotoGP bike for the first time in competitive action in Portimao and Valencia. Something to look forward to.
Certainly is, and of course, as Davide pointed out there are two reasons why they would want to give Buliga that opportunity, not least because he's earned it. Second in the World Superbike Championship this year, certainly went down swinging in Jerez a week ago, it's fair to say. Not that it pleased everybody, particularly those Turks in attendance, as Toprak Razgatlioglu did clinch the championship in that 10th final race of the season, but also because he's essentially going to be Ducati's test rider or the rider ready to step in should they have another Marc Marquez injury, absence, or any of their factory riders out next season. Buliga will be first in line to step in, so they clearly want him to have some laps on the bike, with some experience on the bike. We expect to see him in a couple of weeks' time in Portimao, a circuit that, of course, he knows very well for the World Superbike Championship earlier this year.
Yeah, they're also using him as one of the top developers alongside Michele Pirro, working on the new 850cc engine project with deep Ferrari tyres. A smart move, isn't it, by Ducati, given Buliga's intimate knowledge of Ferrari rubber over in World Superbikes. So using him a lot next year, behind the scenes as a MotoGP test rider for the new 850cc project. You have to feel that they're keeping one close eye on Budig as a potential option for the 2027 MotoGP lineup, moving forward into the new 850cc/Pirelli tyre era. Well, here is Fermin Aldeguer, one of our two most recent first-time winners in MotoGP. I've come back down to earth for the bump after the Wellington Indonesia in Phillip Island last weekend. Speaking to a couple of his Grazini crew behind the scenes, it sounds like Aldeguer did exceptionally well to see the checker flag in the main Grand Prix over in Australia. He was really suffering with some wayward electronics, which sounded like he was making that GP24 a right old handful for Aldeguer. He did really, really well to get to the line.
Indeed. Crossed the line in 14th place. 18 seconds, he described it as something of a disaster in Australia, but as you say, it wasn't exactly all his fault. So many expected so much of Aldeguer really in Australia, given that he'd taken victory there previously a year ago in Moto2, arriving on the back of his first MotoGP victory, but that never really looked up the cards, did it? In Phillip Island, missed the top 10 and missed Q2 on Friday by just 5 thousandths of a second, avoided that penalised. We just underlined once again, if you get Friday wrong at any stage in a Grand Prix weekend or in a Grand Prix season, there is absolutely no recovery from that, although the chances of recovering are very slim indeed. Once Aldeguer missed the top 2, or certainly missed the top 2 rows of the grid, got himself up to 7th on the grid. Aldeguer's hopes of taking back-to-back Malaysian Grand Prix victories were very, very slim. Here's Fabio Di Giannantonio. 6. Giacchetti. Talking about riders who will perhaps regret qualifying too far down the grid. I think Di Giannantonio will probably fall in that category. Thirdly, had a victory challenge in it. Had Di Giannantonio qualified anywhere sensible or anything like in line with the performance of his motorcycle. Di Giannantonio in 10th on the grid. He had the performance to fight Raul Fernandez for victory, but was way too far back by the time he got himself to that group of traffic that were up behind Raul in that Grand Prix. That group that included the likes of Marco Bezzecchi, of course, included Alex Marquez too, who's a victim of that battle to Indicia. Got into second place, but by the time he got there was way too far back. Let's head down to pit lane then. We already they're speaking to the Bertardozzi about the differences between Pecco Bagnaglia's bikes. What are you seeing, Jack?
Yeah, it looks to me like, as I said to Davide Tardozzi, we've got 24 seconds for Bagnaia has been using ever since the Massano test. We all put down to a turnaround in fourth in the second, and then to compare that alongside it, which is currently being warmed up, the 25 technically, the 25 50, 25 swinger, the 25 right-hand side, we did that as well. It was even many things to me impacting with the fabric that we may well have wheeled across the same from Highlands just a week ago in order to basically do an obvious back-to-back test this morning. The data that they've got from Sepang when they were last here is going to be absolutely crucial for them to try and work out what's happening with Bagnaia, because Sky TV of Italy put to him yesterday, is this a technical problem? Is any sort of mental confidence lacking playing a part in it as well? And he was absolutely clear with Bagnaia. He said, no, this is technical. I'm not having a confidence crisis. This is nothing mental. There is a problem with the bike. And once Ducati get it sorted, I know what I can do. Just look at Motegi. So this a crucial morning for Ducati and Bagnaia, comparing those 25 and 24 items to try and get an understanding of what has gone wrong on that.
Yeah, thanks very much for that information, Jack. Back-to-back DNFs in a Grand Prix for Bagnaia for the first time since Catalunya and the Sanctuary 3 years ago in 2022. Phillip Island, of course, the third round, the last four, where he did not score a single point. It's been a pretty rough ride for Bagnaia over the course of this flyaway run. As we ride on board now with Fabio Di Giannantonio, had to climb up his sick bed, did he, last Sunday? To find just his third podium of the season in a Grand Prix. Hard work he gave himself after coming through from 10th place on the grid. Close to podium was in the sprint, second behind Raul Fernandez at the checker flag in that Sunday Grand Prix. And he did it with a very high fever. He said yesterday, when I spoke to him in the pre-event press conference, while everybody else was out partying in downtown Pels on Sunday night on Phillip Island, he was tucked up in bed with a lens, I think, at about 9 o'clock Sunday night, but feeling much better. I guess the podium, the best form of medicine as far as Digger is concerned.
As I mentioned a moment ago, he needs to get himself a grid position tomorrow morning on go qualifying. Fabio Di Gianantonio has only qualified on the front two rows in 5 of the 19 Grand Prix we've had so far this season. And that's why he's only been able to pick up the 3 podiums in Grand Prix. Somehow he's been able to pick up 4 sprint podiums, which you feel would be a lot harder to achieve when you're starting way back down the grid. But credit to DJ, he's been able to overcome his qualifying woes to pick up some valuable World Championship points. He's 17 points behind Pedro Acosta now. They're 5th and 6th in the World Championship. Pecco Bagnaia is 41 points on the road, but could yet still be caught if, of course, he continues to struggle in the remainder of the season. Bagnaia, in turn, lost 3rd place in the World Championship last time out to Marco Bezzecchi, who is now 8 points ahead of the 2-time World Champion.
He's playing a bit of catch-up here this weekend, is Digi. Of course, he was missing from this Malaysian Grand Prix last year, while he sat out the remainder of the season, having had pretty major surgery on a recovering left shoulder dislocated in the Sachs ring. And then, of course, it all went horribly wrong on his track return on the very first day of 2025 in winter testing here at Sepang back in February, when he had a pretty strong debut on day 1 on the GP25. And as he marked that happy return, a rather aborted wheelie coming out of turn 4 as the front wheel popped back on the ground going into turn 5. It sent Fabio on his backside and unfortunately fractured his left collarbone, which completely destroyed his whole pre-season. So he's missing a bit of recent track time, a bit of recent knowledge around this circuit. At the moment, 12th fastest on Espargaro. Let's come off a bit more housekeeping, shall we? We've touched upon Michele Pirro replacing Marc Marquez once again. Colin Spargaro's back on the KTM Tech 3 machine this weekend, standing in for Maverick Vinales, doing another stellar job opening standing. Policho currently leads this early exchanges of FP1. Lorenzo Savadori's back for a play on the factory in Prudy with no Jorge Martin. Doubts as well about Jorge Martin being back for Portimao in a couple of weeks' time. And Augusto Fernandez is a factory Yamaha wildcard once again here this weekend on board the new V4 as Pedro Acosta looks like he's taking a bit of an early tip off in the second corner.
Fortunately for Pedro, it looks like a front ender into turn 2. We've already seen this morning a big high side coming out of 2. Tim Robinson 1, 2 and 2, and they don't tend to end well. Acosta's now just waiting for a gap in the traffic, which now opens up for Pedro to get his bike up and running. As you can see, it's very sharply downhill there, so he should be able to start that KTM now on the way down, and he has indeed. Looked a little bit of gravel on the racetrack as he does so. We're just going to see the KTM come into view on its side, and there goes Pedro Acosta. Fortunately for him, that's about as slow a crash as you can have around the Sepang circuit.
Because Kashi minds back to the Sepang test on lap number 14 of his defence of the World Championship. He was right in that turn 2 when Jorge Martin's nightmare 2025 began. A big high side, just 13 laps into the campaign on the Aprilia RSGP. Suffering hand and ankle injuries. I remember vividly those slow motion shots of Jorge when the visor flipped up and he was already wincing in agony before he come to a rest at the side of the track. There's bits of bodywork falling off of that fake factory KTM. You've got to be careful here because the stewards might be the point to have a little word in the ear of Acosta.
Sure, he'll be coming back to the pits anyway, but you're not getting a black and orange flag soon to bring him straight up pit lane. Well, this is already looking slightly more positive for Pecco, isn't it? We'll see 2-time Malaysian Grand Prix winner, the unforgettable first 5 laps of last year's Malaysian Grand Prix, 24 hours after he really lost the World Championship in the spring as he crashed at turn 9. Bagnaia winning the Battle Royale with Jorge Martin in the early stage was scampering off to victory, and Bagnaia leads this free practice 1 session early on a 2.004. Of course, his pole position of last year is some 4 seconds quicker than that.
The problem here as well early on for Jack Miller. Looks like he's had a technical on the Prima Hamac Yamaha. Poor Jack was devastated. He was absolutely gutted, wasn't he? Especially out of podium contention in his home Grand Prix in Australia last weekend. Having claimed his first front row start in nigh on 2 years on an excellent Saturday, fighting for the podium in that sprint. It all went wrong once again for the Aussie on Sunday. 14 points now with Jack Miller's tally from the last 7 Grand Prix. No top 10 on a Sunday in 7 since Brno. So he just really can't catch a break, can he, right now, Miller, on Sundays? Just felt like maybe he wasn't really sure what caused that front end washout at Siberia early on at turn 6. Was it the fact he was carrying that extra fuel load over the full 27-lap Australian Grand Prix distance? Was it some of the Pirelli rubber that had been laid down by the Moto2 bikes earlier on in the day, which sometimes can wreak havoc with grip and feeling in MotoGP? Yeah, Miller, he was really, really upset. He was in tears, wasn't he? having blown a great opportunity for another podium in front of us.
GT went Yamaha this weekend though, because we did see back in testing, so lots has changed in MotoGP since then, but it was here in Sepang where we really began to get excited about Yamaha's prospects for 2025. Fabio Quartararo was right up at the sharp end on both the time attack and over longer runs. Davide Tardozzi even said at the conclusion of that Sepang test that Yamaha were genuine competition for Ducati in 2025. That hasn't quite transpired that way, certainly not on Sunday. Saturday morning, certainly Yamaha got a bike with Fabio Quartararo on board that can match the Ducatis, but not over race distance. Quartararo plummeting out of the equation, having taken pole in Australia last weekend. But this certainly is the best on the test over here with a bit of rocking. Yamaha will circle on next podium. That's what they're going to take it.
Always a good measure of good knowledge of how much progress was probably made throughout the Grand Prix season when you return a good 7 or 8 months to Sepang after the pre-season testing. Certainly for the rookies, of course, about 6 days on track pre-season, as did Yamaha and Honda as part of their concessions. So it is always a good indicator of how much forward progress you've made in terms of Fermin Aldiger, who did those 6 days here in pre-season. Well, no problemo for the 54 at the moment, because he's just, as you can see, just on top of the timesheets with a 2:00.199. Joan Mir on the factory Honda's up to third as Jack Miller gets a pushback from one of his primo comeback Yamaha crew. No obvious signs, left or right was there on Miller's M1 of any fall off, no damage to his leather, so it looks like it's just gone kaput early on here for the Aussie.
As we remind you, Jack Miller and the other 4 regular Yamahas are still on their line force, so that might only last another Grand Prix. Verstappen and of course here once again on board the V4 Yamaha, which he and Fabio Quartararo in particular will be watching the progress of very, very closely as they have an eye to racing that model in 2026.
Yeah, got the impression from listening to some of our media colleagues after attending Fabio Quartararo's media debriefing yesterday in Sepang. He's once again in that sort of rut, getting a little bit weary of a lack of performance from the current incumbent at Y-Star M1. Pole position in Australia, never in contention for the sprint podium from that pole, never in contention at all was with Fabio for a top 10 really. I mean, he slipped way down the order to 11th at the checkered flag. And some rather worrying messages. He's trying to G up those Yamaha engineers once again, isn't he? Saying right now, this obvious patience is when I need a competitive bike is the message from Fabio. Contract year, of course, next year in 2026 and 2027 and beyond. And the message loud and clear once again from the Quartararo camp. This new V4 from Yamaha is not the pure subsidies on the current one. Well, Fabio will clearly be knocking on the door of some rival manufacturers looking for other job opportunities.
They're almost between a rock and a hard place at Yamaha at the moment, because the V4 is the right way to go. But are they going to be able to develop it and get it to a stage by Valencia test where they can actually perform with it? Nice little raise of the eyebrows there with Pecco Bagnaia as he looked in the direction of Gigi Dall'Igna. Whether that was that felt good or whether that felt bad, he's shaking his head at the moment, but he ends up in second place, is Pecco Bagnaia, so not all he should be complaining about. Looks at his hand gestures there as if the front's washing a bit on that Ducati. That's the 24-esque model we understand that Bagnaia has just jumped off. So filling Gigi Dall'Igna run on exactly how it felt.
Hard to believe, having dominated the weekend in Motegi, that he was 32 seconds behind the win. This is a look at Gigi Dall'Igna as he comes back into the garage. Yeah, that's well, the old expression, is it, from Pecco. He drops down the seat next to Christian Gabberini. Told himself on Sunday in Phillip Island after that miserable sprint where he was 32 seconds behind Bezzecchi in that 13-lap sprint. He will not finish last again. So I'd rather crash out 1,000 times fighting and pushing than finishing last. The bike, he said, was hard to ride in the Australian Grand Prix because I think it sounds like Ducati chucked a load of weight on the front end just to try and find some stability, which made it a little bit less agile, a little bit heavier, which gives you the sort of no margin for error. So every time I try to force the bike, I fall off. There's Davide Tardozzi, Mauro Bassini there, who members of the Ducati hierarchy have a little private exchange on the Ducati pit wall canopy.
Perhaps not the most pleasant of exchanges we've ever seen. Although Davide Tardozzi does wear his heart on his sleeve. You're never in any doubt as to how Davide is feeling. Of course, we saw a week ago Sepang Live return to the box partway through free practice 1, jump off his Ducati and said about 3 words before Tardozzi stomped out of the box. So angry he was, and clearly words of Sepang Live that Tardozzi did not want to hear. I mean, it's not looking too bad at the moment in terms of the lap time. Sepang Live is up in 2nd place, but still clearly some work to do down in the 63 camp.
Yeah, Tardozzi's spoken a lot, hasn't he? We've tried our best, we've given Pecco all the support he needs. We've tried almost every avenue possible to try and find some solutions to his front-end woes this year. And he's spoken on more than one occasion about the need for Pecco to step up the plate as well. It's not just on Ducati to try and find some solutions, it's down to the rider as well. Bagnaia then, sure he'll be slightly chirped here with a 2nd place in an FP1 session. And for so much of these flyway races, well, after 3 days on circuit in Japan, Bagnaia has gone AWOL. He has disappeared with that trace. He was been nowhere throughout Mandalika weekend. The Australia sprint was, I think he said himself, an embarrassing and humiliating experience. 32 seconds behind best second. It was. The face as red as his tree Ducati. As there's more crucial development miles put on what is a very striking looking new Yamaha V4 project. Augusto Fernandez at the moment doing a high 202s on that new bike, 2.7 seconds he is adrift of our fastest rider Aldeguer, who's still coming clear early doors in the Sepang Grand Prix weekend. Aldeguer's 2:00.199 over a quarter of a second clear of Bagnaia.
Well, same Paul saw that facial expression of Bagnaia as the pick out of V4, and the difficulty Yamaha have is that it's there going in the right direction by following the V4 route, but is that V4 going to be anything like ready by the Valencia test to convince Fabio Quartararo that it's a bike worth sticking with beyond 2026? Quartararo is not going to be any mood to hang around. He said yesterday, speaking to our colleague Elliot York, that it doesn't really matter to him whether he makes his decision in January or in July next year. It's still going to be something of a gamble and a roll of the dice with the regulations reset for 2027. So that was almost Quartararo indicating that he's not got an awful lot to lose by making the decision early in next season. Yamaha have really got to convince Fabio. It's not about Fabio convincing Yamaha, it's the other way around. Yamaha have got to convince their 2021 world champion that they've got a motorcycle worth sticking with for the future, and it's a motorcycle that will be based on this model that you're looking at now. Of course, it's the 2nd time this season we have seen this V4 on the racetrack in competitive action. Of course, we saw it at Misano when it did have some reliability issues, it's fair to say, and amongst some fairly promising performance, but Fabio Quartararo not exactly impressed with it when he tested it on the Monday following that San Marino Grand Prix. So this is the 2nd competitive outing for the Yamaha V4 and Augusto Fernandez.
One bike that is not lacking performance, it's not lacking a competitive edge right now, is the factory affiliate in the hands of Marco Bezzecchi. Back-to-back sprint wins in Mandalika and in Phillip Island, and really, had things gone his way, he really should have won both Grand Prix in Mandalika and in Australia. He was by far in both the fastest rider, the quickest rider on circuit. Of course, the first lap collision with Marc Marquez ruling him out in Mandalika, and then the subsequent double long lap penalty as a result was all going to make it a mountain to climb for him in Australia. He said when I spoke to him after the Grand Prix in Phillip Island, he never felt like he had the potential to win the race on Sunday. So that was more of a journalist's media hype thing. He was always being very much more realistic, a more cautious tone was coming out of the Bezzecchi camp pre-Australian Grand Prix. He actually said he didn't expect to be on the podium. The time that he lost in that Aussie Grand Prix, which he saw dropping back to 6th place, he thought that was going to be too much to get back through. Through though he did. What a brilliant performance by Benz. You might have seen that graphic at the start of the broadcast. 7 podiums now in 2025, and benching on Sunday. That is now a new record as far as the Aprilia rider is concerned in terms of single-season podiums in their history. The previous best was Alex Spargo, 6 in 2022, and as Marco said yesterday in the pre-event press conference, he's not done. He wants more. Still 3 more opportunities to go to maybe the first rider in MotoGP history on an Aprilia to find double-figure podiums.
We played it up before the race took place, and it proved to be the case when they went racing. But it wasn't so much the time that Bezzecchi lost in the long lap penalty loop, it was the time he lost in traffic once he'd served those two on that penalty, because you can't say that he did anything wrong in the first part of the race. He did the absolute maximum he could by getting himself up the road, so that when he served his first long lap penalty, he was close to the front of the race. He was in third, behind the top two of Raul Fernandez and Pedro Acosta, but then once he served his second, he dropped himself back to sixth place, as you mentioned, and didn't have the ultimate pace of performance to pass Pedro Acosta quickly in those laps following the long lap penalty, his second of two, which ultimately cost Marco Bezzecchi any hope of victory. Had he only had one long lap penalty last weekend in Australia, he would still have won the Australian Grand Prix. Two, though, was too many.
And he also said, doing those sequence of 127 at the start of the Grand Prix, he did just take a little bit too much performance out of the rear tyre to try and make that early decisive gap. A little bit of damage in the two long laps. And taking nothing away from Raul Fernandez, because Fernandez was just superb, absolutely brilliant, wasn't he? That was a high-pressure situation for Fernandez, who's had some doubters, he's had some fierce critics throughout his MotoGP career. Well, he's been a long, long time to put that Australian Grand Prix, and he did not make a single mistake. A very welcome early 25th birthday present for Raul, who turned 25, number 25 here yesterday. And fair play to him as well, he honoured a bet with some of his track out crew, which includes his crew chief Noe Herrera. If he got his first MotoGP podium, well, they would shave their heads. And I bumped into in downtown Phillip Island in Cowes on Monday morning, and it was already job done. So welcome to the Baldy Brotherhood, Raul. He won the Australian Grand Prix, but lost all of his hair. It's a little bit lighter down the long fast straights here in Sepang.
What makes a change from having holy hair out in previous Grand Prix experiences? Sort of conversation going the way that he's top hopeful. Through Grand Prix weekend is Raul Fernandez, proving that it wasn't just a streaky, fluky Sunday afternoon in Phillip Island. He truly earned it off the back of a first sprint podium a week prior, or a Grand Prix prior, in Indonesia. This though feels like the ultimate test from an Aprilia, to prove that they genuinely do have a Ducati beater in MotoGP these days. Sepang has never been their strongest venue, either in testing or in Grand Prix action, as we've seen in previous years. The Aprilia cooking its riders when the scorching hot temperatures for Sepang haven't exactly meshed well with that factory Aprilia RSGP. So there's no question that if Aprilia are competitive enough to challenge for victory here this weekend, then we can take them very seriously as a potential title threat for 2026.
Massimo Riva, Aprilia Racing CEO, has said now on fast and flowing tracks, his opinion, it pretty obviously says that Aprilia is now the reference motorcycle. Make a couple of interesting points post-Australian Grand Prix as well, when he was asked a few questions about Raul Fernandez, Aprilia and Trackhouse sticking with their rider through some pretty turbulent times. Curious, he said, now to see what happens with Fernandez in the remainder of this season, because he made a point about Marco Bezzecchi when Bez got the monkey off his back, his first Aprilia win in that dramatic British Grand Prix. Bez's form then just took off. It was like the clicker he needed. I can do it on an RSGP. Now I want more. And Riva is just curious, interesting like we all are, just to see if the sort of similar effects as Alex Marquez has gone down. Alex Marquez is one of the big favourites for success here this weekend. He tries to wrap up second in the World Championship. Well, Alex has taken a tumble going through turn 7, which is a pretty quick get up around this Sepang circuit. Third gear going through there, flying 130 kilometres an hour. Alex has jumped off, having just set his fastest lap of the session at 2:00.720. 6 was Alex.
Yeah, he was on two red sectors too prior to that point, so clearly pushing on. You can see how dark the sky is getting here in Sepang. There are some forecasts suggesting that rain is heading our way over the course of the day. It might be getting here a little sooner than we think, looking at the skies overhead at the moment. Yeah, if Alex Marquez wins the sprint tomorrow afternoon, he will secure second in the World Championship at the Marquez. But not the ideal start to his weekend. It's in the middle of 7, and a nasty little lip of the curb there as he was firing over into the gravel trap, but Alex very quickly to his speed. Of course, he had a couple of crashes in qualifying last weekend, including a fast one at Cornwall.
2 or 3 big barrel rolls through the gravel trap then for Alex. He'll be frustrated with that one. The airbag gone off, doing his job. Tucking the front and then going through 7. So 2 big name Spaniards who we think will be main protagonists here this weekend, Acosta and Alex. They've already taken FP1 tumbles. On the edge of the curve as well, isn't it? You saw bike and rider gets flipped up into the air. Jack Miller, having had his early tech issues, has just got himself up inside the top 10 in 9th place with Prima Pramac Yamaha. We've got good first sectors being produced by both Bezzecchi and Marini, two Italians. We'll jump on board now with Bez. He's got a brand new medium front tyre on, as you can see on the graphic. Bezzecchi, of course, P3 in 25 and last weekend with another miserable experience for Bagnaia means Bezzecchi did climb into P3 in the championship. While he's down, I mean, Bagnaia has been sort of a serial occupier of the top 3 in the last couple of years. The first time he's dropped out of the top 3 all the season long, with this late rally being produced by Aprilia and Bez.
Portimao and Valencia to come. Bagnaia's going to need a bounce back to take that third place in the World Championship. Almost sounded resigned yesterday to that Bagnaia when he was speaking to the assembled journalist, but he might have to accept that, given his current situation, he's got to accept 4th or maybe even 5th in the World Championship. He's 41 points ahead of Pedro Costa in 5th place in the World Championship, so to go for Bagnaia was in danger of losing that 4th place, but that just gives you a window into how the 63 is feeling right now.
Well, what a weekend he was in Australia last time out for Ralph Hernandez and for the Trackhouse MotoGP team. The Americans first, a success in the Premier class, and they did it in some style, didn't they? Fernandez has been red hot in the last 2 sprints as well over in Indonesia and Australia. I'm sure there was a big party on Sunday night, so we can check out the Monday morning headaches were right now and how those celebrations went. Jack Appleyard joined by the Trackhouse boss, Davide Rivio.
Yeah, great to be down here with Davide after that Tuesday. First question, Davide, is that we see Raul yesterday with no hair. I'm looking here in the back of the box. Noe Herrera has also shaved the hair off. A couple of the team members in Pat and Tommy I see here also shaved the hair, but you've got away with it. How come you haven't shaved your head as well?
Yeah, probably they didn't dare to do it to me, I think, which I'm glad. And yeah, that was a little bit of a bad. And yeah, we had some shaving performance on Sunday night, and yeah. I'm glad they didn't approach me.
Absolutely, but looking on the performance itself, it was incredible from Raul, from taking a lead from Pedro. He looked in control from there. Having watched the race back, how impressed with you when he was on the verge of making history, becoming a MotoGP race winner for the very first time. After everything he's been through, just not told how calm he was.
No, I mean, of course, more than happy to have won a race. Great, fantastic. I'm very happy the way the win came, the way he managed the race, because as I say, there's been a lot of talk with the engineers about tire management, how critical is the Phillip Island by the end of the race with tire. He just did everything perfect. Also, when Pedro overtook him, he stayed calm, in control, waiting, and so from this point of view, it surprised me because it's the first time we see him doing this in MotoGP. I was a little bit worried, can he manage? But he did everything perfect, very well. So I'm very happy for this. And we show maturity, and I hope we can keep using them from now on.
I think it's something you'll agree on that we could see from the outside. That maturity maybe wasn't there in the first couple of years of his MotoGP career, and he's had to do a lot of learning. How much has he developed as a person as well as a rider to be able to get that person?
But I was not working with Raul in the first 2 years. I have very personal ideas about that, and probably he switched from Moto2 to MotoGP maybe too early, and also coming from 8 wins in Moto2 probably was feeling like ready for MotoGP, which is not the case. When you come, you have to learn, you have to go. So probably he had also some up and down on building up his mindset, to accept that in a MotoGP he might have struggles. And also I don't know, he changed team in the first, after 1 year, 2 years, so probably now is a little bit of more stability. The same bike, same team for 2-3 years, same people around. Maybe that also helped. And of course, he has to just to be aware how difficult is the MotoGP, how hard he has to work. This winter he worked a lot on improving his physical condition, which last year was a little bit critical. So I think it's getting mature also outside of the track. The maturity is also outside of the track, and everything helps. A good bike, a good development from Aprilia, his experience, stability, people around, all together, you know. It's a big package when you put this together.
Just finally, last question on the other side of the box. When we were last here in February, I was really quick. We can see the level of the Aprilia now, we can see the level of the team. How big of a weekend is this together for people to get the opportunity to show this level?
Yeah, we can wait to see I again at the top, because he does have the potential. We have a full belief in his potential and what I know he can do. This year has been, we went through a couple of bad injuries, so there is a stop and go on his season, but I'm sure he will put everything together for the next season. This will be a really learning season, but let's see. Also, this weekend can be not so bad for him, like heat, hot weathers, hot conditions, and yeah, I have full confidence that we will see him soon on the top.
Thanks, Davide, and as the rain arrives as well, it's starting to chuck it down here in pit lane. Back to you guys.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Thanks to Davide Brivio. Yes, well, he was in heaven last weekend, wasn't he? For Ralph Fernandez, the heavens have opened here in Sepang. That is going to be end of session in terms of slick tyre action. You just saw that Pedro Acosta was wide into the first corner. We're just about to click into monsoon season here in this part of Southeast Asia. I'm reliably informed by the locals. Of course, it's a tropical climate here in this part of the world, as we get a replay once again of Alex Marquez's mid-session tip-off, then going through turn 7. It looks like, though, with the rain coming, that it's going to be his teammate Fermin Aldeguer on the Gresini race in the cat, and it will end FP1. This, because it is absolutely bucketing down here in Sepang. This rain could be a little bit late than what I think a few was anticipated, about an hour and 20 minutes after the initial forecast that showed rain was forecast. Potential threat of rain around here tomorrow as well. Looking like we're well set for dry Sunday, but of course this tropical climate, rapidly changing climate, anything could happen. It's pretty unpredictable in this part of the world.
The sky is black overhead. It's so dark that we've had to turn the commentary box light on. Something Bagnaia came into the pits a couple of minutes before the rain hit. The flash bulbs of the photographers were so bright because of how dark it is. So you've got the likes of Pedro Acosta, who went straight on into turn 1, now having to go by at walking speed back to the pits because it is so wet. Of course, they are still out there on slick tyres. We've got John Zarco, Augusto Fernandez, Brad Binder and Pedro Acosta, who are all still on the racetrack and still trying to recover their way back. They had just gone across the finish line when the monsoon hit.
Yeah, Brad Binder working his way back to pit lane is 59 seconds behind Fermin Aldeguer, which sounds about my pace, and that's being generous. So it looks like Aldeguer then will close out FP1 fastest ahead of Bagnaia. Now we're getting this deluge on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. Just quickly coming back to Davide Brivio's chat with Jack. I think Brivio himself, he's not a sort of an egomaniac, an egotistical character of his, Davide, but let's not forget he's a team manager that's now won Grand Prix in MotoGP for Yamaha, for Suzuki, and now for Aprilia. And he's done so much work himself to help and steer and nurture what is unquestionably a lot of talent that Ralph Fernandez has. Maybe just lacked a little bit of guidance. Brivio's got hold of the 25-year-old. I think on their own, by his own ambition, Raul has said there's been several behind-the-scenes heart-to-hearts that they've had. Sometimes some home truths have had to come the way of young Fernandez, but it's whether you listen and whether you take it on board that's the difference, and clearly he has. So I think Davide Brivio has been a real key figure behind the scenes as far as Ralph Fernandez's progression is concerned. And both Marco Bezzecchi and Raul touched upon this in the pre-event press conference yesterday. They both spoke in glowing terms yesterday about the influence of a new Aprilia tech boss Fabiano Sterlachini, saying that he really is a guy that offers a lot of guidance, a lot of knowledge and experience, not just in pit lane but out of the paddock as well. So yeah, they both were crediting Sterlachini with Aprilia's current spurt in success.
Costa there indicating that he needed a rudder and some oils potentially when he got down to turn 1 rather than the KTM RT16 that he was equipped with. But I think it's definitely fair to say that I don't think it's unfair on Ralph Hernandez to say that perhaps he demonstrated his relative immaturity when he first moved up to MotoGP, but he certainly has taken major strides where that's concerned. That was Pedro Acosta arriving into turn 1 with slick tyres on a rapidly wet racetrack and having to dig his way out of the gravel jam at turn 1. Approaching there, of course, on a factory KTM at 330 kilometres an hour with a wall of rain in his face.
Well, it's the shark, and these are big fish conditions right now here in Sepang. Pedro Acosta once again shoulders the standout KTM rider, wasn't he, in that Phillip Island Grand Prix, reading off yet another top 5 finish, but a little bit like Quartararo. Feels like now his talent's being handcuffed somewhat by the machinery underneath him. KTM seem to be suffering more than any manufacturer in terms of managing the rear tyre. When they have a drop in grip, it's a lot more pronounced, a lot more severe than some of the rivals around him. Acosta is getting hard to understand why KTM is suffering so much grip deterioration, even when he's in sort of tyre management mode as well. He said, I could understand it more if I was just grabbing a handful of throttle on the exit of every corner and pushing my maximum. In Phillip Island, he said he was riding about 70% and still saw the rear tyre drop off a cliff. I think he's getting a little bit tired of this, Lewis. So, you know, as he touched on yesterday, you know this is a big problem for KTM. When the ultimate tyre whisperer himself, Enea Bastianini, we know how good Enea is at getting worn tyres to a finish line with hot face. Even Enea struggling on the KTM. Brad Binder touched upon this as well. Clearly, the one area where KTM need to identify, well, I'm sure they have identified, but what they have to improve out of RC16 is getting more endurance, more durability out of that rear tyre.
We've got 4 very different riders with very different riding styles and different skill sets, and none of them can get that rear tyre to the end of a Grand Prix, anything like the kind of condition of their rivals, which is the major KTM shortcoming at the moment. And it certainly won't be lost on Pedro Acosta, the stat that we've already mentioned a couple of times during the broadcast, that he's one of only 4 full-time riders now on the MotoGP grid without a victory. Luca Marini and the rookies of Ayagura and Samket Achantra are the others, and with no disrespect intended to other riders on the grid, Pedro Acosta will be looking at some of the riders who have MotoGP victory ceiling. If I had the kind of equipment you had, I would have several MotoGP victories to my name. And although he's, of course, still very early in his Grand Prix career, and still only 21 years of age, Pedro Acosta is not going to hang around on uncompetitive machinery for too much longer.
I'm not going to mention names, but I did catch up with some of his KTM crew last time. I was at the luggage carousel here in Kuala Lumpur on Tuesday morning after our overnight flight from Melbourne. And they said it is abundantly clear, we have the rider, we have the talents, we have one of the best riders on the MotoGP grid right now. It's time for KTM really to deliver a package that can help Acosta get into the winner's enclosure in MotoGP. So as the rain hits down here in Sepang, it's been a bit of a mixed start to this Malaysian Grand Prix so far for Gresini Racing. Furman Aldeguer will end FP1 fastest after his dry 2:00.199. But a tip-off at turn 7 for Alex Marquez. Let's get the thoughts of the boss, Michele Mazzini, who's the jack.
Yeah, as in the background, the teams work feverishly to try and get one of the bikes prepped for these wet conditions to get at least one lap in. But Michele, we arrived here in Sepang thinking that Alex was going to be a huge contender, but hasn't looked comfortable this morning. Have you got an idea why that is?
Yeah, first of all, in the first run, we find something strange in the feeling with the medium rear tire, so we decided to change it. It was faster, but unluckily we crashed. But I think that we already shown some speed in the sector. We need to put it all together as always. And also we look at the data. We have something to adjust on also on the bike, on the setting. And now we will try to execute the bike, try and put some stuff.
Yeah, we can hear one of the bikes in sector 10, a KTM or Paul Espargaro, the first out. But for me, how valuable are these conditions for him going to be? I mean, the last time it was wet, Le Mans, I think it was, he was extremely fast, but I guess as a rookie, trying to get out and have at least a couple of laps is going to be vital experience.
Yeah, it's true that he rode really less this season on the wet, but very comfortable from the beginning that we tried the rain on the MotoGP bike. Also, he find a good feeling with the dry. today with so at the moment we are on the first in the standing, so we started the Friday in the good shape.
Looks as though Firmine's ready to go. Thanks, Michele.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks, as always, to Gresini Racing boss Michele Massini, as we saw Pol Espargaro replacing Maverick Vinales venture out. I was going to say, I don't know about Lenz, he might need his swimming trunks out there at the moment. Old Pol is absolutely falling down here in Malaysia. There's no obvious signs. I look out of our commentary box window off into the distance of any signs of any blue sky. There's been a lot of...
Quartararo nearly lost the front there at 20 miles an hour into turn one, so there's no wonder that Pecco Bagnaia still has his baseball cap on and is not too keen to join the racetrack right now.
Yeah, there'll be a few riders going, thank you very much. I'm parking the... I'm not going, oh yeah, Quartararo again has a moment there as he drops down through this high-speed turn 3, standing water. We know this Sepang International Circuit does drain incredibly well, but there's still going to be pockets and patches of standing water negotiating around this circuit. Quartararo, Rins, his factory Yamaha teammate Pol Espargaro, Fermin Aldeguer are already out of pit lane. Just about to join them is Marco Bezzecchi's factory Aprilia.
Bordering on red flag conditions. I doubt they will red flag it because there's only 2.5 minutes remaining of the session, so they might as well just run this session to a conclusion and then assess the conditions before we're back out for Moto3 in around about an hour and 3/4 from now when they're at their crucial practice session. Pol Espargaro, though, as you can see, through the monsoon temperatures, losing it, aquaplaning. That's what aquaplaning looks like as the tread blocks on these wet tyres fill up with water. They're no longer clearing the water away. You just float on top of the surface.
It's done well, actually, to stay on 2 wheels there as Pol Espargaro. Yeah, these are not conditions conducive to hot laps around the Sepang International Circuit. Right now, Pol Espargaro's thinking, when's Maverick Vinales coming back? Yeah, I'm going to say, when's Maverick Vinales back in action? Alex Marquez will be another rider that's just going to venture out. See on the electronic dash there as he went from neutral up into first gear to leave the garage. I do wonder what sort of an impact this weather might have if it continues at this sort of rate for the remainder of the day. So unpredictable though, when the rain and how strong it will be in this part of the world. Jack, what's going on down in pit lane?
Yeah, this is as intense a rain as we've seen all over the past 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I won't be surprised if we maybe see a red flag. I know there's not long of a session left, but really torrential rain at the moment now.
Yeah, it's teeming down without any question. We're thinking of Quartararo, who's running off the circuit. We've already had a couple of scares as Quartararo at the start of this lap, he's off the track on the extensive tarmac runoff, dropping down the hill through turn 12. Well, Pol Espargaro and Fabio Quartararo need to buy a lottery ticket because they're both pretty fortunate to still be on 2 wheels in this very, very damp ending to this FP1 session here in Sepang.
You're just a passenger when that happens. There's absolutely nothing Fabio Quartararo can do about that. The wet tyres, in which they are outstanding, shaking ahead there for Fabio Quartararo there as he's looking over at one of the Ducati riders who's just left pit lane, I think, on his inside and saying that this is a little bit too much to be throwing these incredibly quick motorcycles around. See how much water the Quartararo is clearing away now as he drops through turn 3 up towards the relatively shallow end of turn 4. Quartararo quite pleased to see the checkered flag at the moment.
One year, that hollow at turn 3 when we had real monsoon conditions in winter testing. The session had to be halted because it was about 6 foot deep. To see a circuit workers who wade their way through to try and find a drain on the outside of turn 3 to try and block it and get some of the extensive water drained away as Raul Fernandez, that's also dropping down into 12, isn't it? Where Quartararo had his aquaplaning moment. It's anything plain sailing right now, isn't it?
He's saying we should be stopping this session, but the session is now over. Checkered flag is out, but I think he's saying that we shouldn't be on the racetrack right now. Of course, there is still a practice start session supposed to be taking place after this. Don't know how much use that's going to be. Once again, as you can see, that little river of standing water across the racetrack into 12, and it immediately spits the track as a pretty out of line.
These guys aren't even pushing. There's no wet tyres in the world with the grooves that are going to dissipate this amount of water. So Raul Fernandez, Fabio Quartararo and Pol Espargaro are thankfully going to end this wet ending to this FP1 session upright, it looks like. So Raul Fernandez then goes through the gearbox, splashes his way down the long way here in Sepang. the track out of Aprilia, which he nearly fell off at turn 12 in the lack of plenty moments. What a weekend there was for Aprilia last time out in Australia. 2 RSGPs on the podium for the first time in 2.5 years. It's Catalonia 2023. Marco Bezzecchi looking great for once again. Let's get the thoughts of Aprilia boss, Paolo Bonora, who's the Jack.
Yeah, it's the big question we've all been speaking about in the media, I feel like, for the past week. Is Aprilia the best bike on the MotoGP grid right now? So I'll put that to you, Paolo. Have you got the best bike on the grid currently?
We are totally convinced that we are now in a good moment for sure.
We did a step forward compared the starting of the season, but we know that we are Phillip Island. We love that the kind of layout and was particularly suitable for Marco Bezzecchi. But here there will be a different track layout, and we would like to see if the improvement that we did, particularly in the stability and in the hard braking zone, is confirmed here. I'd like to see if suitable for Marco Bezzecchi. But here there will be a different track layout, and we would like to see if the improvement that we did, particularly in the stability and in the hard braking zone, is confirmed here in this track layout. Is quite completed this Sepang layout, so very important part to have something.
Marco's form at the moment, Marco size, is the best on the grid. He's been phenomenal, and you have to take into account first gear in a factory team, having done all of pre-season by himself. I mean, you guys must be amazed at the levels he's performing at currently.
Absolutely amazed by his level. Absolutely happy about his way of working and his open mind way of thinking. So he came to us in the starting of the season with the correct approach. Didn't say something, you have to do this and that, but he was listening to us. It was a natural process of improving between us and him. And to be honest, we are so happy about his way of understanding our bike and how he can explain to us his problem and his thought. So at the moment, we can only say thanks to him, thanks to his job, thanks to job of Lorenzo as well, because he developed the job during the season to develop many things. And yeah, we have also the confirmation that we did a good job, because in Trackhouse side, when we bring all the package and the support is now at 100% since the start was, but we have the confirmation that we did a great job also with them.
We've seen Jorge Martin working really hard at the Red Bull Performance Centre in Salzburg in Austria. How close, how likely is it that we see him return in Portimao?
Yes, he did a great job in Austria. Proper plane is fully under the correct time plan. At the moment, we are now evaluating his situation with the support for sure of the medical staff of Dorna, and to be honest, so we have to wait and to understand if we will join Portimao or Valencia.
That's good to know. In case I get her a decision early next week, whoever will speak, Jorge Martin. Thank you, Paolo.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks as always to Aprilia boss Paolo Bonora. Yeah, caught up with some of those close to Jorge Martin early on this week in Malaysia, and it sound like the noise coming out of Martin's crew that possibly thought him out just 1 week, maybe too early. They'll just give him that extra week to recover and then get back to the final Grand Prix of the campaign in Valencia. He's given an opportunity to finish at 2025, which started in dismal fashion with the big crash in Sepang testing, and then it's been just a painful, wretched experience for most of it, hasn't it, for Jorge Martin? As the practice start session then is underway, will be one of our wettest practice start sessions of 2025.
Not sure how useful this is going to be honest, as an exercise, but we'll follow it anyway, because the grid is absolutely drenched. We're in a very luxurious position. Right outside us is the start-finish line and the grid, for which they will launch away from 3 p.m. local time tomorrow for the 10-lap teaser sprint. Fabio Quartararo has absolutely no interest in joining the practice start session at all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Fabio's had enough at the end of that 45-minute FP1 session. That moment he had at turn 12, I think, convincing Fabio that he'll exercise a bit of caution at the tail end of this FP1 session. Zarco, well, we know all of the doubts will come first to what a rider he is. Just brings your minds back to that unforgettable home Grand Prix in Le Mans, the flag-to-flag encounter. Feels like an awful long time ago though, doesn't it, for the 35-year-old Frenchman who has had at least one DNF sprint or Grand Prix in 5 of the last 6 rounds. 6 rounds now in 19, he's not scored a single point. And that 9th place recently in Motegi, he's only top 10 in 12 since that 2nd place at Silverstone. So been disturbed by the sort of the arrival of some new parts, throwing him off the scent a little bit in terms of the setup with his RC213B. I feel like Zarco's been chasing his tail for the latter part of 2025 as we look at Pol Espargaro then get to fire up what is arguably the best starting motorcycle in Grand Prix right now, certainly the fastest in history. And we saw it a couple of times over in Phillip Island, what an absolute rocket ship the RC16 was off the line once again.
Yeah, we have seen this in the past, of course, when we've had wet conditions for this practice start session, but we could indeed have an additional practice start session added to the format later on this afternoon. That is not unprecedented given which use these practice starts are going to be, unless we do get, of course, wet conditions for the sprint or the Grand Prix later in the weekend. Who's parked in then, Jack? Who's not ventured out for a practice start?
Yeah, I've just done a sprint on pit lane to understand who is it. There's no Luca Marini, none of the 4 Yamahas, so Miller, Oliveira, Quartararo have all parked in. Neither of the VR46 duo, Frankie Morbidelli and Fabio Di Antonio, nor Joe Costa, nor Amaya. So those are the riders that decided to sit out the practice start next week.
Excellent sprinting work down there in pit lane as always, Jack. There was Luca Marini. 2 factory Hondas in the dry conditions inside the top 6 when it was dry. The Hondas were fast. Me at 3rd quickest, Marini 6th fastest.
What was here for Raul Fernandez? You can see him there grabbing away in the front brake to try and get the start device engaged. He has got it engaged in the end. Some movement there as Raul Fernandez slings the line, but he was getting a little bit onto the collar there before he left the grid.
The initial launch away was brilliant, and then of course he just got the wheel spin. He started going through the gears on that run out of the front of the grid. It's Pedro Acosta's crew, who at the moment have a rather relaxed experience as he decides not to venture out for this practice start session.
Still see the standing water as they approach. This is turn 9 now that Brad Binder and John Zarco are approaching. There's plenty of elevation change. The water does just sit in various places on the racetrack. We already saw into 12 the water gathering around some of the negative camera parts of this race at the final corner. It's perhaps going to drain away from the outside of the racetrack, so they won't have quite so many problems through that part of the racetrack. Here's Pecco Bagnaia then on the inside of Subkip Chantra, one rider who, so I was looking outside the comments box window, looking over the grid, one rider who did have a miserable practice start, to the shocker, was Joan Mir on the factory Honda. He completely spun his Honda up and just had to leave the grid and abort his start altogether.
Espargaro then back to the head of the grid. You can just see him there dropping down the whole shot starting device on the KTM RC16. He drops the clutch. That's a pretty good launch away. Once again, rain or shine, the KTM really feels like it's unrivaled in terms of getting the initial launch off the line once the clutch is dropped, and then once you start clicking through the gearbox as well with that abundance of power that we know the RC16 has. How many times has the fast-starting KTM got some of their riders out of some deep positions?
Entirely sure that Thomas Barger was supposed to come back around to the grid again in fairness, because the red light panels are now flashing outside our window, and they were flashing when Toll pulled up to indicate that the track is now closed. Come on, pit lane. Don't think we'll get into too much trouble. That may be a little slap around the wrist for that, but the rest of the field are now coming up pit lane. This practice session has now been curtailed, and as mentioned, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they add an extra one at the end of practice here later on today, if it is indeed right.
Are you ready for a flag-to-flag bike swap for Marco Bezzecchi? Which didn't really go according to plan at all, did it? Pressed him to get his leg tangled up with the rear of that number one for RSGP. Now the in-depth discussion going on here between Bagnaia and one of his factory Ducati crew. As he trudges into the back of the factory Ducati garage and ends FP1 second fastest, which is a positive sign, to say the least, about Fort Bagnaia, who's had some fraught Fridays on our flyaway tour. Second quickest, though, at 2:00.455 before the rainstorms lashed this Sepang International Circuit. Nobody there, and a cheeky win there to his crew. Fermin Aldeguer, job done from the Spaniard at 2:00.199. Ranmir led the Honda charge in third place. Pol Espargaro, who led the early part of that FP1 session in the drive, finished fourth. Another brilliant performance by the Tech 3 replacement rider. Informed Bezzecchi was fifth. Two factory Hondas, as mentioned, inside the top six. Alex Marquez, P7 after his high-speed crash at turn 7. Quartararo 8. It was an eventful session, wasn't it? An eventful start of this Malaysian Grand Prix as far as Miller is concerned. An early tech problem costing Jack some track time. Then we saw him take a spill at turn 15 before the rain started. Miller, though, still inside the top 9, with a cost of rounding out the top 10.
Your Australian Grand Prix winner, Raul Fernandez, in 19th spot. To take any firm lessons learned from that session, really, given the curtailing of dry running by the downpour. I guess as we look ahead to this afternoon, it'll be eyes to the skies once again. Are we going to have a dry practice session? 1 hour of running to come later on today, where of course we'll be fighting it out for Q2 places. A lot of sunshine peeking through the clouds to help dry this track up. And who knows, we could well find ourselves in for a weather-affected afternoon of running. With Moto3 out on track in about an hour and a half for their crucial practice session. Fermin Aldeguer, quickest overall then, just shy of the 2-minute mark, ahead of Pecco Bagnaia and Joan Mir. Pol Espargaro, fourth for KTM from Bezzecchi, Marini and Alex Marquez, who went down at turn 7. Fabio Quartararo nearly went down in the wet 8th, ahead of Jack Miller, who had a fall, and Pedro Acosta, who was the first to crash. Frankie Morbidelli 11th from Brad Binder, Iagura and Johan Zarco, and Air Bastianini was 15th on the second of the Tech 3 KTMs, ahead of Miguel Oliveira and Fabio Gianantonio. Alex Rins ahead of our final winner, Raul Fernandez. Michele Puro P20 ahead of his fellow test rider and substitute Lorenzo Salvadori. Augusto Fernandez got 11 laps in on the B4. Yamaha 22nd ahead of Somket Chatra.
As quickly as the rain came here in Sepang, it has gone, it has already stopped. Here we look at Fermin Aldeguer and some dry work at the start of that session. Medium front, medium rear tyre from the Spaniard. Lap 6, he found that 2:00.199. The next lap was not too far behind for the Spaniard.
Yeah, we ain't going to learn an awful lot from these, but let's have a look anyway. Pecco Bagnaia just essentially the one run in. We got 1 lap into run 2 before the rain hit, but perhaps what was more interesting for Bagnaia was the conversations inside his box.
On the charge being led by Mir, he was out on a hard front tyre to kick off that session. The mid 2:00.6 very early on, and then a 2:00.5 puts me inside the top 3.
Pol Espargaro in the end did put in 11 laps across his various runs. He ran the hard front tyre too. Pol Espargaro P4.
Alex Marquez, despite his crash at turn 7, leads sector 1. close between him, Bagnaia and Marini.
And Aldeguer strong through the second sector ahead of his team, Alex Marquez.
Heavy braking to turn 9 in that sector 3. Marco Bezzecchi leads the way ahead of Aldeguer and Marini.
And sector 4 is largely acceleration onto and out of long straights and tight hairpins. Duan Mir, the fastest through there on the factory Honda.
So the 2025 Malaysian Grand Prix here in Sepang kicked off in dry conditions. It ended with the complete opposite, a very wet conclusion to our opening session of the weekend. But before our deluge here in Sepang, before the heavens opened, it was top spot for Fermin Aldeguer, already a winner on our flyaway tour in Mandalika. Aldeguer, then the Spaniard it is, that leads a soggy FP1 in Sepang.